All right, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. It is Sunday, January 10th, 2016. So this is our first show of a new year.
Indeed it is.
I know that there's some stuff upcoming. By the way, this is a live call-in show out of Austin, Texas, sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me, Martin Wagner.
Yo.
There's a bunch of stuff coming up. I know we've talked before about the phone situation. Evidently, we have the device. We've got to do some technical work and some more building security work, and then we'll be ready to start actually taking calls via telephone.
That will be awesome.
Yeah. For now, though, we're still using Skype, so you can send a message to right there, The Atheist Experience, all one word, no spaces. Don't call it. Just send a message. There's a call screener who will be going through and sorting out. We've already got several callers queued up, and then we'll make outgoing calls. So if you guys in the booth want to start, and go ahead and get Chris ready while I'm rambling on about what's going to be happening. I think next week is the 17th, and
Yes.
My friend Neil Carey will be in town to do, I believe, a lecture for the ACA.
Okay.
And we're going to have him on the show. That's the current plan. And I think that also Ed Brayton may be on either later January or
really?
February.
That'd be
Maybe
nice.
it's February's lecture. I'm not completely sure.
Okay.
But I'm back from my Christmas excursion of 3,600 miles.
Yeah, you have just really been putting
I got
lot
a
of
2012
ground under your-
my
yeah.
car's a 2012 that we've got 84,000 miles on it or something.
Yeah.
It's a big road trip every year. But we got to see family, and I got to reconnect with some friends who I mostly hadn't seen in more than 15 years. And it was cool. Did you have a break where you...
I had a very nice little break. I mainly just went home, saw my mom, just took a couple of weeks off, did not much other than eat and sleep and hang out with, walk my dog, read books, play games. It was just a very nice break from everything. So
That's good stuff. This year was a little different. I posted a quick update on Facebook about the trip and what I did. None of it is relevant to the show, and in the slightest. But normally at the end of like a 2-week vacation like that, I'm exhausted and I feel like I need another vacation. This year was a little different. I was actually kind of sad to be coming home because I wanted to spend more time with some people, and then I got back and worked. But I'm thrilled to be back live on the show. We've got, I guess, an audio boost. Chris, are you there?
hi, there he is.
There you are.
Can you hear me, Martin?
Yes, I can. Welcome.
Hey, nice to see you again, Martin. I'm Chris from episode 926. How do you do?
I'm doing just fine. It's good to hear from you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to y'all, too. As far as my topic, this came to mind when I went back home for Thanksgiving. I'm originally from Arkansas, and my stepmom made me go to church, and I was just so irritated. She basically twisted my arm. She was like, everybody in my house goes to church. You know the rules. I'm like, Mom, I'm an atheist, though. It's like, I know, but just go there and pretend like it's like a movie. Act like it's not real, and you'll be fine. And she was like, I was like, wow, you're that upset? I was like, okay.
So I'll tell you something. The one part of my Christmas trip. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was saying the one part of my Christmas trip that I didn't really talk about much is for the first time ever, Beth and I went to midnight mass, and neither of us were Catholic when we were believers, but her new stepmother is Catholic, and they said, well, you guys can go to midnight mass with us if you want to, and I said, that's all right, I'll pass, because I'm not a big. It's not so much that I don't want to do it. I mean, I was curious. It's just that I'm not a big fan of walking into somebody else's church and being a part of their service, even invited, because there's an element of it that is potentially disrespectful, and I don't want to be in a midnight mass when they do, hey, turn around and greet your neighbor, and somebody's like, oh, what church do you go to? And then I say, oh no, I'm the godless heathen atheist from Austin.
God is a lie. Nice to meet you.
But
the crucifixion is the resurrection is bullshit. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we were not remotely.
Exactly.
We weren't forced to
Her church
go.
wasn't like that at all. Her church is more evangelical in nature. I was raised non-denominational, and she's non-denominational as well. And so when I'm in there, they're doing a little praise and worship service, and I'm just sitting there like, is it over yet? I'm done.
Yeah,
and then
you're like the only sober guy at the party.
Exactly. And I'm just like, they're still in the Matrix. I need to like go ahead and get some people to get them out. We need to send them to Zion or something, the real Zion, which is reason and skepticism that this is bullshit. And then
Yeah, I know. I guess I suppose it would depend upon the fanatical nature of the actual church you're attending or something like that. I went to the little Christmas Eve service with my mom. Just to kind of be with my mom. Because my dad's not around anymore.
I tend to look at it more like
Yeah.
I mean, you go to funerals. You're not going there for the dead person.
Yeah.
You're going there for the family and friends of the dead person.
And so, but her church is like it's a routine Episcopal church, and there's not really a whole lot of crazy talking in tongues or any gibberish or like that. They just sort of did their thing, and then it was done, and
So how'd you deal with it, Chris?
And so basically, I just sat there like I was so upset I couldn't talk to my stepmom for like 20 minutes. Like while we're just going on, I was just like, let me go ahead and inhale and exhale, and then I started taking notes, and I'm just like, wait a second. I remember what I learned. They went over, the book of Isaiah, chapter 46, in which it says, "I, the Lord, make peace and create evil." I'm like, aha, your God is not omnibenevolent. He creates evil. No evil God can be all good. So I got you there. And I started like writing a whole bunch of like notes on my my phone, remembering verses that I learned, back when I was younger, trying to like piece everything together. And I was just, and my mom somehow was looking at me. She was like, "Wow, you're still taking notes." And near the end of the service, I was like, "Yes, I am. I'm gonna go ahead and make my own YouTube channel, like a little side project for myself."
Yeah, that's
It's okay. It's just to everybody.
and that's the same advice I give. Maybe younger kids who are atheists, whose parents are, basically forcing them to go to church. I always tell them, go and take notes and ask lots of questions. At a minimum, you got to understand that even when you're free to do your own thing, it's not the last time you're going to have to deal with religious people, religious discussions. It's good to know something about it, unless you plan to just go off and be a hermit somewhere.
Right.
We're still stuck dealing with people's varying religious beliefs, so it's good to have some kind of understanding. I'll caution you in the same way I caution other people. There's a lot of verses that atheists kind of jump all over as aha, and the passage in Isaiah about creating evil is kind of one of them. I'd recommend looking into what apologists actually have to say about it and find flaws with what they have to say as apologetics, rather than just going, oh, it says here I create evil and that's what it means. Because if you get to talking to somebody who's done the apologetics dance on that passage, they may have ways, and for this passage I know that they do, to make it seem like it's not necessarily saying what you think it's saying. And the religions, and Christianity in particular, have defense mechanisms built into them. Things like, well, you can't understand what this is actually meaning because you are a godless heathen who is not being guided by the Holy Spirit when you read it. It's easy just to point out that is complete bullshit.
Exactly. I'll say like, oh, you've been given over to a reprobate mind, so
Yep.
you won't understand. The devil's deceiving you and blah, 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 blah. And what's really interesting, here's another thing that I dealt with when I was over there for Thanksgiving. Now, mind you, I haven't spent Thanksgiving with them in over 10 years. And it was very emotional for me because Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my family back in Arkansas are ministers, especially like my grandfather, he's a deacon. My grandmother on my stepmom's side is a teacher. And while we're like sitting there for Thanksgiving, they're actually having us hold hands to pray.
Yep.
And I was just like, do I bust out the atheist bomb and let them know that I'm an atheist? Because I have my relatives that came from Mississippi who I haven't seen in like 15 years, and they don't know that I'm an atheist. I'm just like, I'm gonna go ahead and go along with it. I'm just gonna go ahead and keep my eyes open, just be alert, make sure everybody's safe, make sure my niece, my nephew don't make too much noise, and then just eat and do my thing.
Yeah, the family dynamics are a very tricky thing to deal with. There's no doubt about that. I think you just have to read. I think you just have to read the situation as you are in it, and to whatever degree you're worried about creating And not wanting to be the person who causes strife at a time that's supposed to be the holiday time. I can understand that. So, yeah.
And I get the weirdness. I mean, at one of the Christmas dinners, actually at two of the Christmas dinners, because we ate lots and lots of Christmas dinners, everybody, stood around and held hands and they prayed. And I understand, how it's potentially awkward, because I've felt mildly awkward at first too, especially because I'm holding hands with people I don't know. That was probably the more awkward aspect of it than the religious thing, because if I'm in somebody else's house and they're hosting me, they're giving me a place to sleep, they're the ones that are putting up, feeding me and everything else. If they want to pray before a meal, it's their house. That's what they get to do. Now, they don't get to force me to participate if I, have objections. But since I don't think what they're doing is incredibly harmful. Yes, it's reinforcing, beliefs, but I also understand where it's coming from. This is basically an attempt to foster family and community and show gratitude. And it was a little bit about preaching at the Atheists on one occasion. But
I detect a story there. But
I'm not fearful of it, and they already know what my position is. So there's no strategic advantage to, no, I'm not going to hold hands and pray with you guys. There's no advantage to, mocking it or anything else. And for me, the best thing I can do is stand there and participate. I don't bow my head and close my eyes. I just stand there quietly. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it shows that they don't get to say, oh, well, you're afraid to try this for fear that you might be wrong.
Exactly, yeah.
And the other thing is, if you're standing there when everybody's supposed to have their head bows and eyes closed, you get to see everybody else who doesn't have their head bowed and their eyes closed. And that's how you recognize the other people there who are either scouting or who might also be non-believers. And that can be helpful for some conversations.
Oh, hell yeah, you can definitely say that again. Another experience that I had with my Thanksgiving there, it was like late at night and overheard my stepmom singing to my nephew the Jesus Loves Me song.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I'm cringing on the inside. Childhood indoctrination. He doesn't understand it. He just turned 1.
Yep.
Oh, no. But I was just like, I can't do anything about it. And I'm thinking about this like in the long run, like once my nephew gets older, how that's going to affect him. And then he's going to be like, Uncle Chris, you don't go to church. Mama's wondering, like, Mom told me you don't go to church. What's going on? He's going to have all these questions.
Well,
Good.
Then, yes, that's absolutely. That's when you just treat him like an adult and have an open conversation with him, and and the kids are smart. They'll pick up on that. They know when they're being talked down to and patronized to. And if you're not the guy who does that, if you're the person who just says, well, what do you want to ask me? And he asks you something, and you answer him, and you talk to him, and it's a man-to-man thing, and he'll be, wow, you kind of respected me in that, and we had that will have a big impact on him, just having a one-to-one conversation with you, where you're willing to let him ask you questions, and he doesn't have to worry about the grown-up authority figure saying, don't talk about that, or being punitive towards asking the questions you're not supposed to ask. Just that openness he'll appreciate.
On the indoctrination stuff, it's difficult to tell what can actually happen with that. Sometimes people get indoctrinated into a religious belief and they're there for life, and in other cases it can backfire horribly later on, or it can just kind of fade out. It doesn't take with everybody. I mean, for me, I was a believer till I was about 30 or 31 probably. But even today, it's funny because Beth and I will be driving around in the car, and one of us will get some insidious little song that you had to sing on the church bus stuck in our head, and we will poison the other one by singing it out loud so that they have to sing along too. So now they are just as punished as we are. This is the day. And they're so like, it's
This little light of mine.
the only thing that
I'm gonna let it shine.
Yes.
Come on, everybody.
Don't
This
do that.
little light of mine.
we apologize to our audience for all the earworms we just stuck in here.
Yeah.
But
You're welcome.
I was also a huge fan of Schoolhouse Rock, and those songs get stuck in your head too. And I won't say that it is simple indoctrination, or that it's the kind of like cult-like indoctrination where you're setting up and ostracizing people and excluding them from the outside world to the same extent. It definitely does happen. But with my brother, he has kids, and I told him early on, if the kids come up to me at some point in the future and say, hey, Uncle Matt, why don't you go to church? I'm going to tell them, and then I'm also going to let you know that I told them, and let them know that they need to, they can talk about it with you, that they're free to come to me with questions, and that's fine. My brother understands that, despite the fact that we don't necessarily agree on the religion thing. And so I've got a nephew who's 14, who knows that I'm an atheist. He goes to a private religious school, and one of his best friends is also an atheist. It's not always a big issue between people. And some of the things that we would count as indoctrination, and possibly even in some cases child abuse of some sort, I just have confidence that reason and reality are going to win out in the long run, and that your nephew having somebody like you in his life could very easily undermine all the efforts that people have to indoctrinate someone into religion, just by being yourself and being open and honest and willing to talk.
Exactly, and that's the type of uncle that I want to be. I want to be the uncle that we can go ahead and be the best of friends, and talk to me about simple things, serious things, and I will always be his shoulder. And I also do have a niece as well, so I'll be her shoulder, to cry on and to talk
Yep.
things over with as well.
Yep, sounds good.
All right.
Oh, there's how are y'all doing on time? I don't want to hog up all the time for other callers.
Well, we got a bunch of other callers waiting, so I was going to move on to some more, but if you wanted to get one last point, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll go this last little tidbit. Now, one of the things that I, am concerned with, as far as my experience when I was young, I wouldn't say I was forced heavily, in the church, but it was a big influence. We'll go to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night. Sometimes we had children's church on Wednesdays. We had Bible study on Fridays. When I was younger, I would memorize Bible verses, going from Proverbs, Proverbs 1 was my chapter, and then we'll also, just focus on other verses and different things like that. And well, besides my point is, now I want to focus on the issue of corporal punishment, by parents, and between by parents to their children, and how it's justified by the Bible. And that's another thing that I'm concerned about, because with my nephew and my niece, I have had bad experiences with it, more in particular by my father. We're now on speaking terms today, and I just think back to that, and it's basically justified by that. What's that verse in Proverbs? Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then, what the Christians don't understand, it was, they'll say if we're whooping you to so that the Lord won't shorten your days on the earth, taking it back to Exodus. But that's not really the case, because in Deuteronomy is basically when they were talking about, we'll bring the child before the elders and say, this child is a glutton, the child is a drunkard, stubborn and rebellious, and then they're supposed to stone the child to death and purge the evil from among you, and all of Israel be afraid. That type of deal. What's what I'm trying to say? I'm tying that together, saying that the corporal punishment is not fully justified. It's not.
Well, I'll say it.
Yeah.
I am absolutely, completely opposed to corporal punishment. Now, I realize that, not everybody holds that view, and that it's not all equal. I've seen occasions where, there's a swat on the butt or whatever that's clearly not going to do, physical harm. But my take on it has evolved. Once upon a time, I had no problem with it. It's probably one of the bigger sticking points that I have with you know, conservative fundamentalist people in my family who are all just about, oh, that kid needs a beating, that kid needs a beating. You know, no, what that kid needs is a little education about empathy and how you have to operate in the world and share space, and they need to be coached to consider things from somebody else's perspective and how they would like to be treated. You know, that type of thing. I think that one of the lessons that comes out of corporal punishment is that whether it's merely out of frustration from people who won't respond to reason, which could be because you're really bad at communicating your point and reasoning, that somehow they're to blame and that violence becomes justified. And, you know, I don't know how far that extends, but I don't have kids of my own. So when I raise this point, people are like, well, if you had kids, you'd understand. No, I can guarantee you that if I had kids, they would not be getting beatings. That, you know,
Exactly.
Well, you know, it's all about promoting this culture that says right and wrong is simply a matter of following the authority figure and what the authority figure says, and it's not about, you know, instilling in the child an understanding of why a thing is right or why a thing is wrong. It's just, yeah, and I think that ties into Christian morality, which really isn't morality at all. It's just follow the authority figure. What does God say? What are the commandments?
Right.
And it just, you know, I think a big criticism of religion is that even if you could give Christianity credit for, you know, people do good things in the name of Christianity. Well, the problem is that it gives people bad reasons to be good.
Well,
and I think
also,
it's better to have good reasons to be good.
things change over time, and things within our culture have changed. I remember as a kid, everybody was a huge, big Bill Cosby fan, and he's this paragon of, you know, caring, loving fatherhood. This was, you know, back before the rape allegations. But if you look at it, I mean, that from one of his most famous comedy bits, he does the, you know, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. And it's that same mentality, which, you know, you can laugh about in the comedy sense, but when you start looking at it, oh, this is an advocation for, you know, punishment that is based on violence and not punishment that's based on rewards and consequences and understanding of your place in society. Somebody emailed us just this week on a similar issue, trying to talk about how to teach their daughter about, you know, things. And that's the best explanation or best guidance I can come up with, is to look at the consequences of your own actions, to consider what would the world be like if everybody else did the same thing that I'm going to do? What would the world be like if everybody else took this particular action that I'm considering? And use that to evaluate whether or not it's a good idea. Because what we tend to do is get rather myopic and only see the immediate consequences, or only see the consequences to us, and we do a risk assessment of how risky this action is based on a small sample of information that doesn't actually tell you what the risks are.
Exactly. And now my reason for raising this question is because I'm concerned for my niece and my nephew, and once they get older, my sisters or moms are gonna go ahead and end up maybe whooping them with a belt or a switch. And I've had the worst experience of it. I remember when I was in church and I was trembling in fear of my father because I was abused by corporal punishment so often and so much.
So I can tell you this. There were periods of time where my dad worked in one city and we lived in another, and he would come home on the weekends. And there were parts of it that were terrible because it was on occasion saving up all the bad things that you did during the week as you wait till your father gets home, And in this case, it wasn't just waiting till the end of the day, it was waiting till the end of the week. And there was the anxiety about what was going to happen. There was a guilt cycle about you've done something wrong and you deserve what's getting ready to happen. And there was this incentive to constantly pray that your mother got soft and forgot most of the shit you did during the week so that she wouldn't tell him. Now, my dad wasn't a violent man. I don't feel like we were remotely abused or it was excessive, but there were a couple of occasions. He had a razor strap out in the garage hanging there. And it was just there to be a constant reminder of what could happen if you did something bad enough. And now I always loved my dad, but we're close and we're friendly. And things aren't great because I'm an atheist and I'm leading people to hell according to him.
Yeah.
But we get along great.
Right.
There are things that we don't agree on. I think I came out the other side of things that some people might look at as abuse. Okay. I don't suffer a lot of the post-traumatic stress that some other people did. I think in part because I felt that I deserved it during that time. It wasn't something that happened all the time. It's not like I was running around getting beat every day.
Right.
You do some stuff wrong, and this was the punishment. And while you're in that mindset, you think it's not as abusive. It's when you get out of that mindset and reflect on it. And when I got out of that, I deserved to be spanked, and realized that I didn't, instead of being angry at my parents for doing this, instead I understood why they had done what they had done. And it's the reason that I'm not mad at my parents, I'm not mad at the pastors or anybody else coming from that religious background, because they are just as much victims as I am, and they were trying to do what they thought was right, even though they were absolutely wrong.
Exactly.
They're a product of the culture.
But on that note, Chris, I think we're going to move on to another caller. I appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
Take care.
My pleasure. Y'all take care.
Yeah, we go, Chris.
Have a good one.
So long.
Right on.
So let's get Boris from Seattle queued up. I don't know, did you get beat all the time?
Every day, constantly, and usually with bats. My big thing was I would be just stood up against a brick wall, and I would have rocks thrown at me, and there would be like a little target painted right here for like 50 points and 20 points and 20 points and 40
You're
points.
making this up.
Yeah, I kind of am. No.
Gosh, there's that,
No. Yes, you just can't trust us atheists to lie.
That's something,
No, I didn't. I mean, I just got the occasional swat on the butt if I acted up, but I mean, it wasn't like anything. It wasn't like this hardcore Christian corporal punishment culture that I grew up under.
And I don't want to misrepresent what happened either, because there are some funny things that happened as well. So my mom would have a fly swatter that was hung on the side of the refrigerator, and when we would do something, she would pull out the fly swatter and grab you by your arm and start swatting on your butt. And you do the little thing where you're running around in a circle. And we would scream and cry and flail. And then when she was done, we'd go back in the room and laugh about how it didn't hurt at all. And my mom would go off into her room and cry about how she had beaten the crap out of us. And so, I mean, I think that while that ends up being kind of a funny story, that and my parents loved us.
See, you find the humor in hitting kids.
Let's do that. I think the other thing that comes out of this, though, is that my parents loved me. They had some misguided ideas about how better to reinforce good behavior and get people away from bad behavior. But Boris from Seattle, thanks for calling the show.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
can
can.
hear you just fine.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Yeah, doing all right.
Pretty good.
So what's up?
So I'm transitioning kind of away from like a new age kind of theosophical type religion to atheism, and there are a couple of arguments that they give for their their way of life that I don't really hear a lot addressed on these atheist shows. And
Who does? Atheists? That atheists give?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Especially on YouTube, a lot of times you guys talk about fundamentalist Christianity, which
I think what Boris I think is saying is that there are claims made by New Agers that he doesn't hear atheists addressed, right?
Oh.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
So like what?
Okay, for example, the religion that I was a part of, they basically said you have no need for faith. You can take all of our claims and you can meditate. You can learn astral projection, other techniques, and you can explore various spiritual dimensions with direct experience. There's no need for faith.
Okay,
And some
I'll
people
agree
do.
with them that there's no need for faith. So they have these claims about meditation and astral projection. How do you test that to confirm it?
Well, that's the thing. You can only confirm it for yourself. It's not something that somebody else can confirm for you. So there's no peer review or anything like that.
Yeah, and so how do you ever determine that what you experienced is accurate in reality and not a fiction being created by your brain?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm no longer part of it.
Yeah.
So
That's the key question.
now there are, in some cases, depending on what they claim, there are ways to test claims if they get specific enough. And the James Randi Educational Foundation did this for years with their $1 million challenge to verify claims of the paranormal or supernatural. So if somebody tells you that you can astral project and you meditate and you've convinced yourself now that you can do it, depending on what it is that you claim you can do, there may be ways to actually test it. You can put something in a location that you don't have access to and don't know what it is, and try to astral project in there and find out what it is and see what your accuracy rate is. There are ways to make sure, or there are ways to test to try to make sure that you're not deluding yourself. And what we know is, and this is, I understand the appeal of these sorts of things, and I get why they would say something like, you don't need to rely on us telling you this. This is something that you can find out for yourself. The problem is, as the police go by, the problem is, number one, if you keep trying it and it doesn't work, when do you give up? Because aren't they more likely just to keep encouraging you that there's something that you're doing wrong or that is preventing you from actually succeeding? And you see people around you who are claiming success, so that encourages you to keep trying.
Exactly.
And you can't verify any of their successes. Here's the weird thing. If this were true, what would we expect the world to be like? If people could actually go into a meditative state and project themselves out of their body and come back with information remotely, remote viewing, etc. Now, astral projection, I realize...
Claim.
What's that?
That's not exactly the claim.
Right, I realize that astral projection and remote viewing are two different things. Because, and what I'm getting to is that with something like that, with remote viewing, that you could go get information from somewhere else, that's testable. With something like astral projection, where you're going off into, and I don't know the correct words to say this, but some other realm to get some spiritual truth about the universe, there's no way to verify that what you come back with is actually real.
Right.
But I can see what can happen with the whole sort of communal reinforcement thing going on. Because first off, what they tell you, at least according to your account, Boris, you're told straight up, these are not things that can be empirically proven. You can simply prove them to yourself. But you have this group of people, and it's like, well, what do we? Everyone who is convinced that they're going through one of these experiences comes out of it, and they talk about the experiences they have. So there becomes this sort of lexicon of what an astral projection experience it consists of, and so this sort of builds about, okay, well, it can't be proven, but you should expect to see this, 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 and this. And so when you have people who are caught up in this culture and they want to have these experiences because they see the other people claiming to have them and being all very happy and about it, just having these sensations of euphoria, you want to experience that, and so you go into it, and it's very easy just through the power of suggestion to experience the sensations that you have been told you are going to experience ahead of time.
We see it in religion.
When you put yourself in. Yeah.
There's no way to verify
that's
that
an
somebody
understood psychological phenomenon.
There's no way to verify that somebody's been filled with the Holy Spirit. But if you're standing around in a church and everybody else is feeling this elation and they're attributing it to the Holy Spirit, then that's what you do too. And the same thing in many cases for speaking in tongues. I've told the story before about a friend of mine whose best friend had reached the age where he had to go up and speak in tongues along with the other teenagers, and the pastor just looked at him and said, just fake it, we all do. And then I know former Pentecostal ministers, and not just Jerry DeWitt, although he is one, who used to speak in tongues when they were religious and still can. And with something like speaking in tongues, there can be at least an attempt to test it, because you can take this incoherent babbling that all of us shaman are going to do, and find out if there's anything in there that is structured in the way a language would be structured. If there are consistent phrases that you hear over and over again, when one person is speaking in tongues to somebody else, the other person doesn't understand it. When you play back a recording of what they said, they don't understand it themselves. And when you investigate it to see if it carries with it the signatures of what you would expect from a language, it doesn't. There's no consistency there. And so that would be something that would, at least the excuses that we get are, well, it's a heavenly language, it doesn't fit the model of the others. And I find
How would you know, right?
I find that to just, well, not only how would you know, I find it to be yet more evidence against the idea of a God. Because, like, for example, the Bible would say that God is not the author of confusion. And yet, if in fact there is a God who is giving some people this gift of babbling incoherently in a language that they don't understand, in a language that the people they're talking to don't understand, in a language that does not map to what we understand about languages, it is a completely useless exercise. It's not conveying any information at all, which makes it identical to Babel. And if it is in fact coming from a God, then you have a God who is so stupid that he's giving people a gift that is utterly useless, confusing, and cannot possibly accomplish anything other than deluding some people to participate.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what happened with me. Basically, I tried all these things. I had some experiences, but nothing to conclusively prove to me that anything they were saying held any water. So then I watched this video by Aaron Ra where he talks about how he used to be in these kinds of New Age religions, and how he saw how you can, through suggestion, experience these things, even though it doesn't have any objective reality.
Yep.
And although, I don't know if that's true or not, for me, I can say I didn't really have any conclusive experiences. So I do have a second point if you have a little bit of time.
Sure. And by the way, there's nothing new about this. There's a book, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, that's from, I think, the 19th century.
Yeah,
looked into
1800s
these
or
phenomena, when you get witch doctors doing stuff, and we can see it in psychological tests where one of my favorites is they have an elevator where everybody is turned around and facing the back wall of the elevator, and the door opens and somebody gets on and they're confused about what's going on, and they get on the elevator and it's a long elevator ride. And eventually they get so uncomfortable about being the only person who's actually facing the door that they turn around and face the back with everybody else. That's how we react to things. And I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I was going to say, I don't know why people fall for
I thought everything, I thought just because they said these things are true, and I verified, they have a lot of psychological teachings, right? So
Yep.
I thought just because of their psychological teachings seem true in me, then some of the other stuff that they're saying about the universe outside of me is also true.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing. I can tell you 10 things and 9 of them are true, and that doesn't tell you anything at all about whether or not the 10th thing I said was actually true.
Exactly. The other thing that they say, and this is something that I never see addressed, well, sometimes, but is that, I hear a lot of arguments how religions are all similar because, people have the same types of delusions. But their idea was religions are all similar because they're getting information from the same vague source. And so all these spiritual books that have all these teachings that people take as literal, they're actually all metaphors for hidden spiritual truth.
Yeah. That essentially it's this idea that we all have access to this one secret spiritual hidden truth. Right. And some people are just interpreting it differently, and some people have taken elements of this big truth and twisted it to their own designs or interpreted it incorrectly. Right. And at no point does anybody make a demonstration of what the actual truth is.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Or just how you can tell.
One truth, and about what precisely? About everything? How can there be one truth about all things?
And they look at skeptics and say, oh, well, you guys they view skepticism as if it's cynicism, and there's a distinction. Yes. Because they'll say, well, you guys think that this stuff is all bullshit. Well, I think some of it is, the things that we've actually been able to test. But my position is not, it is impossible for someone to astrally project and come back with real valid information about some grand truth that I don't have access to in my normal life. I'm not saying that's impossible. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Well, my position is I don't have any good evidence that it actually does happen, and I'm not sure of any way that we could actually test it. And so until somebody comes up with a way that we can reliably confirm and test these propositions, they are useless. They are empty. They have no value, because with faith, even though they tell you that you're not using faith, I would say in fact you are, that what you're doing, because I think faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have good evidence. And if they're saying, oh, you can just rely on yourself, well, you're exercising faith that you are not you specifically, but you are not a victim of self-deception. You're assuming that you are able to correctly interpret your experience and draw conclusions from it. And that just doesn't seem accurate.
It's all very similar to what you're describing. Last time I was on the show, we had the pantheist fellow call up.
Yeah.
And he started out by insisting that there was actually a scientific basis for his pantheism. And so we just sort of walked through it with him, and sure enough, it eventually got to the point where you hit this wall, and beyond which faith takes over. And I could tell the guy was, look, it just sounds like you're doing good old traditional religion. You've just put different labels on things, and you've kind of changed around some of the window dressing a bit, but it's really all the same. There's no real difference between your pantheism and the Christianity of anybody who walked out of a church this morning.
So before we spend the whole time talking all over your points, how did you kind of find your way out, and what are you doing now? Because you had asked something about kind of transitioning to atheism, which to me is I kind of get it from a colloquial sense, but there's no transition to atheism because, hey, do you believe in a God? No. You're an atheist. The transition from I used to I don't.
I have said earlier that I had some experiences that I can't just dismiss.
Mm-hmm.
So in the transitioning, I'm trying to reconcile those experiences with what I actually know to be true versus what I've been suggested to be true.
Yeah, so what you're maybe transitioning towards is just more like the skeptical mindset, transitioning towards skepticism,
right?
Of which atheism is just a part.
I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot, but can you give me an example of one of the things that you experienced that's posing some difficulty?
It's hard to put in words, but there is some quality of consciousness that I just can't explain with physical science, and I can only observe it in myself, obviously, and I can't even talk about it because I don't have the words.
Mm-hmm. Well, you did just fine just then. You said there is a quality of consciousness that you are not able to explain,
right?
And that's fine. There's a thing I experienced. I don't have an explanation for it. But that is at least, honesty, right? You're talking about here are the limits of my knowledge on this particular thing. That I can't explain it, though, is not automatic. Oh, it's clearly a spiritual, transcendent astral thing that happened. No, you just say, I don't know. I don't have an explanation for this particular thing.
Yeah, I got all kinds of experiences that I don't have an explanation for.
And that's fine,
right?
To admit that you don't have an explanation for a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So the reason I'm transitioning now is exactly what I think you, Matt, said earlier is eventually the stuff doesn't work. So I said, okay, I'm doing something wrong. I'm a really bad student. So I'm going to take a break for a while just to stop shaming myself. And once I took the break, I actually started to examine these things critically, and they just didn't hold water.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, it's a good sign. Keep thinking about this stuff because that's...
It sounds like to me you're doing exactly what you need to do. One of the things I'd recommend, so people tend to look at skepticism as if it's about debunking, and that's not the case. And you talk to pretty much any modern skeptic, whether you're talking Shermer and somebody at Skeptic Magazine. I just noticed we have a whole library shelf over there.
Whole
Skeptic
whole
Magazine.
rack there. Yeah.
Or somebody like Joe Nickell, who's actually been an investigator of paranormal stuff forever. And their goal is not to debunk, and it's because there's a couple of reasons. The biggest one is that the proposition may not be falsifiable, in which case you can't debunk it. What they're attempting to do is to confirm this, and they're repeatedly failing to find the supporting evidence to confirm it. And if skepticism is about anything, it is about saying the time to believe something is after it has been confirmed. It may in fact be true. I mean, you could tell me, hey, I know for a fact that this house is haunted. I've experienced it over and over again. I've seen the ghosts myself. They've spoken to me and blah, blah, blah. And you may in fact have justification to believe. I don't. And the time for me to be justified in believing is after I actually have the evidence for this. And a skeptical investigator going in to look at your claim would be trying to get evidence beyond your personal experience. And in some cases, it's possible to show that you were in fact mistaken, that there's a creaky pipe that only happens when the wind blows on Thursdays. I don't know what Thursday had to do with it, but they look at skepticism as if it's about debunking, and that's not the case. Most of the skeptics that I know, even the ones who will, speak disparagingly of the quote unquote psychics who are preying on people's grief and making money and saying just horrific things. Oh, you're going to find your daughter when she's actually dead. Even the skeptics who are hardest on those people, if there were good evidence for these claims, they would accept it. And most of them, some of them probably wouldn't want these claims to be true, but what you want is completely irrelevant. There are those skeptics who would love for some of these things to be true. And among magicians, there are a lot of skeptic magicians. There are also some magicians who are not at all skeptical, who have fallen into the traps of things like Doug Henning did with transcendental meditation, which may have cost him his life by encouraging him not to seek traditional medical treatment for his illness. But so the big thing is don't be so enamored of your own positions and experiences just because they're yours. Question everything. And don't believe anything until you're really confident that you have good reason, and have had somebody else look into it as well. Because there's a statement, a quote, that reality is the things that we both agree exist, or the reality are the things that don't stop existing when you stop believing in them. If you can get other people to independently verify, that's one of the best starts. And when I hear, whether it's astral projection or something else, where they're saying, oh, well, this is something you have to find out for yourself and you have to rely on yourself and nobody else can verify it, until they give me something more, I've got to immediately lump that in the bullshit category.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it would be. I think it would be incredibly, not just fascinating, but it would be one of the most monumental scientific discoveries that we would ever make, to learn that someone had this sort of mental power to either see the future or communicate with other realms or move objects telekinetically or whatever. That would be fantastic. I think it would be really, really cool to discover
superhero powers.
To like an actual real X-Man.
We have more superhero content in our world today than probably ever, with all the Avengers movies and Ant-Man and the Flash.
But I think that's why skeptics really do hold the people who claim to have these powers to a very high standard of evidence, and aren't just willing to accept this kind of loose goose stuff that the average. The public, the gullible people that that they prey upon do, because it would be that monumentally important a new discovery if it were true, and so the people who make these claims should be held to a higher standard because of the importance. That's what I think. I don't think it's because simply a need to show that this stuff is all bullshit all the time.
I think the last point I'd make on astral projection and the claims that are unfalsifiable is that even if it's untestable, even if you're the only one who can go and experience this, if you were actually coming back with useful information that was in fact true, that information should be testable. Because until you can verify the veracity of the information that you've come back with, you have no good reason to think it's true. Even if you were able to astrally project somewhere and learned something or discovered something, it isn't just true de facto. It has to be confirmed. So,
well, a lot of the time, these kinds of claims are personal. It's like
precisely
my personal. For example, I need to work on my anger, so I go inside of myself and through meditation, astral projection, go into my own spiritual realm and figure out what caused my anger. Oh, it was my grandma, 20 years ago, stuff like that.
And I wouldn't say that it's necessarily impossible that you could engage in some introspective kind of analysis and get to the core of some issues. I don't necessarily think that there's any reason to tie anything supernatural to that. I've sat around, I mean, you know, we know that things like cognitive behavioral therapy work. They don't have to put any mysticism into it. And I think what some of these New Age spiritual mumbo jumbo kind of views are doing are taking elements of psychology and adding a mystical element to it.
Right.
Exactly.
So that it has some gravitas. And it reminds me of what Scientology has done by trying to make it scientific with the e-meter, which is complete bullshit. This is actually something that we can't test whether or not it's removing body thetans or exposing, the thetans that are clinging onto you. But by trying to inject science, it's like when you put somebody in a lab coat for your commercial. 9 out of 10 doctors say Matt's an asshole. Cool. Lab coats don't make it true. In this case, it is true. And on that note, I apologize because we're running up on time. I want to try and get to a couple other callers. But good luck. Keep questioning everything. And I'm glad there's a lot of people who wouldn't take the steps that you've done to actually care about whether or not, hey, is this real? Am I wasting my time? Do I have any good reason to think that I should keep doing this?
So you're doing exactly what you need to be doing right now.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and get David from Nova Scotia queued up.
I'd say don't believe anybody who claims to be psychic who did not win last night's Powerball.
Did anybody win?
No, it's Wednesday. It's going to be 1.3 billion.
So, this is time where I'll say something. Which
Now let's
is,
talk about some skepticism.
Lotteries, I've always said, are attacks on people who are bad at math. I am also bad at math because when the lottery gets up in the 600, 800, 900 million, I don't know how. I have to buy a ticket. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, I know that I have virtually no chance of winning.
You have a mathematically better chance of simultaneously being hit by an asteroid and struck by lightning.
Yeah, but my cost and benefit analysis of this is if there's a 1 in 60 million chance of hitting the lottery, and the lottery value is 10 times more than that, then I'm kind of getting 10 to 1 on my money.
Yeah.
So I'm buying a ticket. Just like I did Saturday morning when it was only 900 billion.
A paltry 900 million.
I'm just disappointed that I found out I didn't win from Martin.
Yeah.
I didn't even check the ticket yet.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to have dropped that on you. Yeah.
It's one of those things where the good skeptic, the good rational individual looks at that and says, yeah, that's a dumbass waste of my money. And then there's the rationalizing human component that says, you know what, it is a waste of my money, but I've wasted $1 on something that had no chance of making me a billionaire.
Yeah. You spend $1 to engage in a little fantasy for a day about what you would do with the billion.
Yeah.
And then
I've got a lottery, even when I've never bought lottery
it's like
tickets,
buying a
I still
movie
had
ticket
lottery
inside
list.
your own head,
Wait till I get that secret door room to the,
Yeah.
Anyway, David, thanks for
And my
waiting.
laser turrets on the roof of my house.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, appreciate it. What's up?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're a little faint, but we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So I was actually calling. It's interesting that some of the topics came up that did. I was curious, Matt, what having a background in magic, has that affected sort of your view of how people process beliefs in religion?
Yeah, it didn't for a while. I've been doing magic since I was about 5, but we just watched home movies at my brother's over Christmas, and it turns out I've been doing it since I was about 2.5, because that's when I got my first magic kit. It was in one of the home movies.
Baby's first skepticism.
When I was in the Navy, I was doing a lot of card tricks and close-up work, and I was also a Christian. And there were people on more than one occasion who, when I would do something, would freak out and thought that I was using demonic powers to do the trick that I did. And this really, really bothered me. It bothered me because as a Christian, I didn't want somebody to think that I was, dabbling in, satanic stuff to do anything, let alone a dumb little card trick. And
I had a similar experience.
Yeah.
I started doing magic when I was about 5, 2, roughly, like when I was in school. And then I did it professionally for about 8 years, traveling around, busking, doing festivals and things
Oh, yeah.
like that. And I had done, it was a Paul Harris effect, a color change effect for a girl that was part of a like a tour bus of Christians that were there at the festival to rap for Christ. And they started crying and freaked out, and a whole bunch of them. And I felt so bad at the time that I had to like take them aside and be like, it's just a trick, and kind of explain how things were done to an extent without giving too much away. But
that's, well, see, in this case, in at least one case in the Navy, I actually would show them this one individual. I didn't stand up in front of a whole bunch of people. I showed them exactly what I was doing because I was so disturbed that they thought that, and I was like, no, here's how I did what I did. And I kid you not, he looks me right in the eye and says, that's not what you did the first time.
Wow.
And I'm sitting here thinking, if I can fool you because I've been doing this for years and actually, developed some skill with it, why on earth would I dip into black magic to fool you if I can fool you without it? And it was very frustrating. By the way, side note, send an email to the show. If you like Paul Harris stuff, I've got some of the first edition spiral bound Paul Harris stuff from
nice.
early 80s. But
I'm fascinated to be informed by this phenomenon that there are people in this modern day and age who will just look at someone doing a simple birthday party magic trick and actually think demonic forces and real magic is being performed.
it happened to me in Australia.
That is wild.
When I was in Australia, there was
I know that we live in a very anti-intellectual, deluded culture, but I would think at least people would know about card tricks and and make the money disappear.
No,
and stuff
there was
like
a
that.
street
And they
preacher.
Really believe that. That's
there was
wild.
a street preacher in Australia
God.
who cornered me and asked me about the magicians on TV and when they're levitating, are they actually tapping into powers and levitating, or is it all a trick? And I was just floored. But the things that I learned since I'm no longer a Christian, the way what I know about magic has changed the way I view religion a bit. I'm sure that you've experienced this too, where if you listen to some people describe a trick that you did, what they describe is not only better than what you did, it's better than what you could have done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the faultiness of memory of someone relaying something that they just witnessed was huge. The eagerness.
They tell you to like, hey, do that for my friend. You're in this position where it's like, I can't do the thing that you just described to them.
Yeah. And not only that, so it demonstrated to me the faultiness of memory and how bad people are at understanding and relaying and communicating what they saw accurately. Also, there are some people who are terrible audiences because they're like, oh, they just reach out and grab the cards, or he did this, or you did this, and even if they don't know. But there are other people who are so eager to have the mystery and that their mind immediately almost wants it to be true. And this is why you get guys on TV. There's YouTube videos out there that go through and analyze professional magicians' tricks, illusions, and try to show that they're using demonic powers.
Yeah, Darren Brown's a pretty big target for that.
Yeah, and he should be, because he's the world's greatest mentalist living right now.
I agree. He has a new series on the 12th, The Push, that's coming out.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, I have seen everything and read everything from Darren right back to Devil's Picture Book and before.
I have the Devil's Picture Book too. It's great.
Yay! So I got a new friend in Nova Scotia, and
Actually, one of the things that I'm in the process of working on is putting together a book called Through the Conjurer's Lens.
Oh,
and
that
I
sounds
want to
great.
interview a series of magicians, and specifically on how their experiences with magic have influenced their skepticism and sort of the things that they've learned, the psychology of people and crowds and all the sorts of things.
I think that sounds phenomenal.
It's a book that I wanted to read, and there isn't one that exists that does it. So I figured
Go
I
at
just have to
niche.
do it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, drop me an email. I won't. I'm not like super best friends with. I don't know Darren at all. I'm not him, so I'm not going to sit around and name drop. But I have connections to people who have connections to people, and maybe we can help you get that started because I think that sounds
that's
great.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Where should I email you?
Oh, that's a good time there. You can always email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself and everybody involved with the show. And as a reminder, after the show's over, people get together and go to dinner. And we're currently going to
Threadgill's North.
on the north one on Lamar.
That's perfect. Well, I mean, yeah, it's great to hear that. I know that, at least for me, one thing that I noticed that changed a lot is now I get really, really angry at mediums and faith healers and things like that.
You understand where Randy's passion comes from.
Yeah, and I understand the anger, especially at the ones, Randy has said many times, that he can't prove they're not using supernatural powers, but if they are, they're doing it the hard way. And I think we can all point to purported mediums who are very obviously using tactics that we are familiar with, and in many cases doing it poorly and still being incredibly successful.
The last question I wanted to ask you before you're all out of time is, what is your, especially being like a fan of Darren Brown, what's your view on things like hypnosis, which obviously some parts are bunk when you look at people that are saying, like we're regressing people to past lives and all that.
Yep.
To me, that just kind of gives it a bad name. But I feel like there's some usefulness. There's apply of some skill that can help people, whether it be to make changes, whether or not it's even a really powerful placebo at work. I mean, there's clearly something. What's your view on that?
Here's my short take. This is my opinion. It is based only on my own experiences with it and talking with. So I did a bit of hypnosis when I was young. Thought about it. Potentially working it into an act at some point. I know several people who have done hip hacks, and I've also read quite a bit from other magicians, mentalists. I'm not going to make a declarative, here's the truth about it, but here's my take. So far as I can tell, there's no confirmation of any sort of altered state that the brain goes into. It's not like hypnosis gets into an altered state, or it only talks to a subconscious where the conscious is not aware. It seems to me that it is an agreement between two people to play act. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know that and I'm not the only person who's used that phrase, I'm probably quoting somebody, but I don't necessarily know that the hypnotized individual is necessarily aware of things in the same way that we would be in normal conversation in daily life. I don't see any evidence that there's anything mystical or supernatural about it, and I don't know how useful it is, because I've seen people who hypnosis can help you stop smoking. Can it? Can it really?
I've seen people have those results, but the thing is it's sort of hit and miss.
Right. It's one of those things where
isn't it all reliant?
Right?
Isn't it all reliant upon the willingness of the subject to have this experience and their suggestibility? You have to. It seems to me that hypnosis requires, or anything like it, requires a very willing subject, someone who wants to.
It's not, to me, it doesn't seem like it's a lot more than I'm willing to do whatever you tell me to do. Yeah. And the drama around the hypnosis is what kind of gives the person permission to let go. Mm-hmm.
So what's your perspective on things where it's sort of covert form of hypnosis? Darren's done some stuff like that, where through certain, say, phrasing and body language and gestures, you could get an idea into somebody's head without them being aware of it that they will act on.
Yeah, so in this case, you're getting much, much closer to neurolinguistic programming, which is crap. And early on, Darren would say that he actually claimed that he was using NLP, and there were some magicians who criticized him for that because he was using it as patter, but he's so damn good at what he does that even people who perhaps should have known better started to buy into the ideas of NLP because he's so good at what he does. And I think you'll see that in the past maybe 6 years or so, he's never mentioned it again.
Okay.
I think he's completely scrubbed it from his pattern. So far as I'm aware, I wasn't involved in any of those discussions. I heard about all of them secondhand, and I find him to be. I think he's got incredible integrity, and he's done a lot to show. He's done a lot for skepticism in showing how people can be fooled, and
His Fear and Faith special was really good.
it really was.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's all. That's all the
As
time
much
we have.
as somebody might want to have, these Jedi powers, I don't think that that's really a thing. Certainly that's not what hypnosis is. I think it's, like you said, it's almost just a very skilled form of persuasion, is it not? You have a suggestible subject. You have someone who is extremely skilled at kind of communicating. You have someone that the subject trusts, so they're already kind of viewing the hypnotist as a trustworthy, almost authority figure who is going to lead them to a safe place, not a dangerous place, and so they kind of willingly go along with the thing, right?
That seems
I
to be.
definitely don't think it's a mystical thing, but
Yeah.
I think at the least, I would say it's an advanced communication model that can be more persuasive in the right context.
Yeah, that seems to be along the lines of what it is. When I did the Texas Association of Magicians convention, there was a great hypnosis act, which hip acts have the magicians are kind of divided on whether they love them or hate them, and but we had a lot of fun with it. Tiny Bubbles was out here from Vegas, and it was fun, and I got to work the camera and stuff like that for it. I don't. It could be that we have all the answers and I'm unaware of them. But what I will remind people is that when you're watching magicians, mentalists, even hypnotists, especially if you're watching them on TV, be aware that you are seeing what they want you to see. That in television there are plenty of edits, there may be pre-show things that happen before the camera starts rolling that you didn't see.
Sure.
I could put together a thing that makes me look like I am the greatest magician mentalist on the planet, and well, apart from the theatrical performance part, I'm not nearly as handsome and dapper as Darren is, but I could edit something that looks amazing, or I could have Seth edit something that looks amazing. Let's be honest. So just be aware of that when you're watching this stuff.
Yeah.
It's entertainment.
All right, I'll be sure to drop you an email, and I'd love if we could set aside a time to have a further discussion, interview kind of thing.
Sure. Thanks, Dave.
All right. Have a great day.
Take care.
Let's
time
take
for one more?
Let's take James from Austin. That'll probably be the last one we'll have time for today, because I think this is a question that
Yeah.
could be fun.
Could be. Let's see.
I remember, when I was a teenager and I first started getting into hypnosis, my girlfriend at the time twisted her ankle, and I hypnotized her and convinced her that her ankle wasn't painful and throbbing, so that she could walk on it to get back home.
Yeah.
And when I did that, it freaked me out because I wasn't, I was still fairly new to this. I wasn't even convinced when I would hypnotize somebody that had really happened. I thought they were punking me on several occasions until this happened. And after it was over, I realized, holy crap, I could have done real harm, because if her ankle was actually damaged
Yeah,
and I
and
put her in
getting
a
her to
position to
walk
walk
on
on
it,
it,
yeah.
I just exacerbated the problem. And that was the last time I ever bothered hypnotizing.
But something did happen there. Even if it's just the suggestion that you were able to convince her. I know I have a friend who had a tooth out and had hypnosis in lieu of anesthesia. And so I guess something's going on there. But like I said, I don't think that there's any sort of mystical altered state going on.
Yeah.
It's probably just a very powerful form of suggestion. And
My understanding is that they've tried to scientifically determine if there's different brain rhythms or whatever. Did we lose our last caller?
yeah, okay, I think that might have been what he was telling me.
Okay.
We lost a guy. Okay.
I don't know.
Number
Go ahead.
1 has been waiting a bit.
One's gone.
Or 3.
3, James from New York.
Waiting for quite some time.
Oh, yeah. All right. I thought this was going to be way too big to go into at the end of the show.
Oh, okay.
And because it's
Okay.
focused on me, I didn't think that was necessarily fair after the what does Matt think about magic. But you there, James?
Let's see. Well, we'll see if they bring it up.
All right.
Okay.
So while we're waiting on James,
Yes. Some people have been asking, like, what is on the shelves behind us, and it's just, we have a big library that kind of spans, the whole building here, and but we do have the German TV special.
I don't have a copy of this yet. Is my copy here at the library, or am I getting somewhere else? Yeah, this was Mission Control, Texas. Some documentary filmmakers followed us around for a couple of years, off and on. And
But now that DVD though is a German release, which means we can't play it here unless you've got a region-hacked, like PAL converting DVD player. But I do believe that there is a way to stream it online.
I was able to watch it online.
Yeah, but it's really neat.
I'm sure if you do a search for Mission Control, Texas, you'll find it.
So we're
James from New
big
York.
in
you
Germany.
there?
Looks like we don't have.
Do we have James?
Well, if we don't,
I'm going to wait quietly for 5 seconds for James to speak. That's not quietly.
oh. Well, dead air is just bad. But
Okay.
no.
Welcome to the Dead Air Show, live from Austin, Texas, sponsored by the
Told them I
Atheist
was
Community.
saying,
of
lost that
Austin.
guy too. All
We
right.
lost that. As a matter of fact, rather than trying to stretch the show out since we keep losing callers, we'll just call it quits for the day.
I think so.
Welcome to 2016. Thanks so much, Martin. for
Yeah,
being
nice to
here.
be back, as always.
And
Good to
for
see
our
everyone.
Studio audience,
a very nice studio
including a baby that actually cried when I wanted it to, and then stopped when
We're here
I wanted to.
in the
I
fishbowl
did that
here.
with my mind. And that's how you could edit a TV show to make it look like you could do anything. We'll be back next week. As I mentioned before, I think Neil Carey is going to be in town, and he'll be on the show talking to us then. I'm not sure what my upcoming schedule is, so I'm planning to be here, and if I'm not here, I'm somewhere else. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
So long. And Matt will now make the stream disappear.
Couldn't hardly hear anything. These earbuds, they were kind of muffled.
Really? I could hear the guy. Everyone was very quiet. I could hear them, but they were quiet.
They were kind of like muffled, talking a bag. I think I didn't bring my good earbuds, and I think these are. Yeah, I didn't have not very.
I didn't have mine last time.
Quality.
I had to use one out of the bag, and it was a bit of a.